Hello, folks. I'm Nick Bernardo, your host of MyGovWatch Live, the B2G Roundtable. If you're east of the Rocky Mountains here in the U.S., good afternoon. Good morning to those out west, and hello to anyone joining us from the far corners of the earth or watching online in the future. Today is Wednesday, November 20th, 2024. This series is brought to you by MyGovWatch. With a curated white glove approach, MyGovWatch delivers leads in more than 200 industries at double the rate of free government tools and at a fraction of the cost of legacy websites. Big government contracts do not start with a solicitation, but all roads lead to one, and your budget for hearing about RFPs does not have to be thousands of dollars per year. Start your 14-day trial today. So, folks, here we are, November 2024. I don't normally have a background like this. I normally just have like pictures of my kids or a vacation that I've been on or a vacation that I'm going on. But I thought it was topical to spend today's session, this month's MyGovWatch, the B2G Roundtable, talking about how a second Trump administration may affect government contracting, and if so, in what specific ways. So I've been sort of letting the format of these sessions evolve. We're 2 years into this series. Excuse me. If we bring you on, we'd love to have your audio and your video. At a minimum, we need your audio. If you're super shy and you just want to chat a question, we'll try to answer it that way. If we can't answer it because we just need more clarity on the question, we'll just tell you that. But yeah, lots of neat stuff to talk about today. If I bring you on, I will also be asking, here's what I will not be doing today. We will be talking about policy. We will be talking about different eras, Obama, Trump, Biden. We will not per se be talking about politics. You guys can leave that for your Thanksgiving table if you so choose. So as much as possible, we're going to try to stick to, very mundane details of policy around different administrations and not let it stray for that. And I'm sure you can appreciate that as well. I may even ask you when I bring you on, I may even ask you to tell me what your Thanksgiving plans are, any Thanksgiving anecdotes, things that you're looking forward to about Thanksgiving, things that you're not looking forward to. So, as you know, if you've been with us before, and there's always people who are with us who have been with us many times, it's a very casual format here. When we bring you on, you can stay on with us for the duration. That's kind of fun because then we have 5 or 6 people involved in the conversation. So, Don, I'd like to bring you in as a presenter or as a panelist, so look for a prompt, and you will receive something that will ask you to share your camera and audio. Hi there, Don.
How you doing?
If I were doing any better, I'd be you.
I appreciate that.
So, Don, before we get started, what are you looking forward to about Thanksgiving or any fun Thanksgiving memories you can share?
Yeah, I have lots of grandkids. So one of the things that we look forward to, you're a stranger, but only once in our household. That's something my wife and I have treasured for many years, number one. Number two, so we always have someone we don't know that comes to the table and we learn about them, whether it could be students, it could be homeless, it could be a variety of people. It's just something that we've always done. That's been very important to show kids and to lead by example, and grandkids, that tradition is important. That we all come from someplace, and it's always good to learn who and what other cultures to have greater diversity, empowerment, and inclusion, or education and inclusion of others in the world, right?
It's a
Number
beautiful
one. Number
sentiment,
two,
and it's really nice that you share your Thanksgiving table with that sentiment. Thanks for kicking us off that way. And so, what's on your mind today? What do you do for the sake of those who obviously do not know you? What do you do, and where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from the Phoenix, Arizona area. The company I work with is Allery Building Maintenance, and they're headquartered out of Kansas City. We've been propelled to help companies through CPACE projects across the country. to get commercial buildings. A lot of people don't know that commercial buildings are really responsible for 40% of our carbon footprint. If we were able to reduce that by half and did our part just in simple things, low hanging fruit stuff, that we could actually make enough of a difference that it would propel us to the top three green countries in the country if we focus on that piece. A lot of people think it's transportation, but truly it's the commercial buildings that exist, and we provide service trades and ways of becoming more energy efficient through energy management, EV chargers, as well as self-perform in 40 plus trades across the country.
Well, that is a fantastic resume. And I think you had some questions around certifications and statuses.
Yes, one of the things that we find some challenges with as you're propelling yourself to the national forefront, you're still a smaller company and you're a minority owned or a woman owned business. There's certain percentage points you get to help win certain contracts. Once you get that contract, though, you have to be worried about trying to get other services or being involved in other things where you can have a greater impact and maybe even greater revenues, but you risk losing the contract you worked so hard getting and have had in place for a few years. And so I would like to learn a little bit more about how to navigate through that and more efficiently.
Yeah, so I think I would start with this question. Are we talking about federal contracts here, or are we talking about all government contracts?
I think it comes down to state and federal, but
Okay.
mostly federal as well, because it's almost like you get punished if you're trying to do more than one thing.
Yes, and I understand what you mean by that. So, for the purposes of this answer, we're going to talk about federal contracts only because once we start talking about state and local contracts, now you're talking about 51 or 52 different things and different sets of code and regulations around that. For federal contracts, for folks who may not be aware of it, the federal government looks at things very much in terms of what your business does within certain NAICS codes. And so, Don, let me ask you a question. How many NAICS codes are associated with your SAM.gov account?
We we limit it to about seven because we're afraid to limit too many.
Okay. So, by the way, anyone can assert any NAICS code on their SAM account. And for those who don't know, you need a SAM account in order to do business with the federal government. And on the website, you need to select NAICS codes that relate to your business. And the NAICS codes are the 6-digit numbers. They used to be called SIC codes back in the day. NAICS code, 6-digit numbers. So as an important factoid, and you may already know this, Don, so my apologies if you already know this, but did you know that different NAICS codes, the SBA assigns different thresholds for different NAICS codes depending on the nature of the activity. So you could have one NAICS code with a revenue-based threshold for what makes a small business, right? And that could be $32 million or it could be $16 million or whatever the case may be. And you may have another business that you operate under the same umbrella, an affiliated business, to use a term of art, and that business may be under a NAICS code that has a status, a size threshold based on the number of employees. So are you aware of that? And is that issue at play here?
I am aware of that, but the challenge is sometimes in the federal contracts, they state what their preference is in their awarding. So you have to be careful that you don't delete yourself from the front by being under one six, threshold versus the other.
Yes. And so for the folks who don't know, and can you tell me what statuses are we talking about specifically?
Minority business owned category because it gives you additional. So if you're not as competitive, but you're a small business and you're in that region, the government will allocate, like you said, up to 16 million in a specific category or group of categories. Once you're outside of that group of categories, you then get some challenges where you either have to give up those contracts or not participate in the future. for an opportunity that you may or may not get by going in another zip code. Now, one of the
Correct.
other
So
things we haven't done affiliate companies, which is something we could think about doing, but there's cost associated with that and time too. So I want to make sure we don't I'm not sure the best way to approach that. So go ahead.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah. And so we're only talking about the small disadvantage status. Are you an 8A firm?
No.
Okay, so we're talking about the small disadvantage status, and there's two different things at play here. One, and this is some of this, Don, is for the audience and not necessarily for you. You probably know some of this stuff, but with the small disadvantage status, um, if you have that status, then you've been able to demonstrate that you are disadvantaged economically and that you are part of a disadvantaged group, or the ownership group of your company is part of a disadvantaged group. So it's unlikely that you will lose that part of it, right? Once you're
Right.
disadvantaged, that's not changing. But what Don is alluding to, folks, is the idea that if you are not a small business, you cannot be a disadvantaged business. If you are not a woman-owned, I'm sorry, if you are not a small business, you cannot be a woman-owned small business. So it's not like there are federal dollars set aside for large minority business or large woman-owned businesses, or even large hub zone or large disabled veteran-owned businesses. You first must be small, right? And that's what Don is alluding to. And so there's a little bit of a chess game that goes on for companies, and I'm aware of a few examples, one of which is a large contract that was happening 8, 9, 10 years ago, where everybody was wondering how a certain company was able to bid on it as a small business. So this is not in the disadvantaged realm, but it's just as a small business. And research into that led me to understand that your size is determined when you submit pricing, right? And so if you are interested in bidding on a contract, then you're able to assert that you are a small disadvantaged business based on what your revenue is in relation to the threshold the day that pricing is submitted as a part of the proposal offer. But what you're really talking about to a larger extent is how do you play this chess game? And unfortunately, I wish I had a really simple, straightforward answer for you, other than to say, I feel your pain, and that many tens of thousands of companies have realized what you've realized. And that is, there are incentives for being small. There are incentives to being disadvantaged, hub zone, woman owned, disabled vet, all the way down the line. But those incentives are not forever. They're not for a lifetime. They are only while you are still small. But here's the good news. The good news is that if you win, let's say, a 10-year contract, and it's a 5-year initial term and a 5-year option, and let's say you were considered to be a small business when you submit your offer, it doesn't matter what happens after that. You could become a massively large business as a result of that contract and as a result of other business deals that you do, commercial and government. You will be a small business for the purpose of that contract for the life of the contract. Now, that's not the best news because there is that chess game about when you should bid on certain things because you may jeopardize your size in winning. So I'm acknowledging your pain, but do you at least see the merit or the benefit of that?
Yes.
All right,
No,
follow-up questions.
that's exactly what we've been experiencing, and there is no easy, and you're like, oh, I wish I didn't win this, then I could have bid on this.
Well, here's what I will tell you. You might look into the SBA Mentor Protege program because that program, if you are willing to mentor another small business, maybe smaller than you are able to help get another business online. You're able to own a significant percentage of that business, and you're allowed to team joint venture on contracts and do a disproportionate amount of the work if you are partnering with your protege. So I would encourage you to look into the Mentor Protege program. It's not a silver bullet, but it's a way of growing by partnering with other people. Now, you don't like giving up revenue, I understand that, but it is a way that companies are helping to brunt the force of losing their small business statuses overnight by fostering mentor protege relationships.
No, I wasn't aware of that. That's a great avenue that we need to pursue. You know, there's an old saying, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's very much true in federal contracting. Um, I'm aware of lots of companies that have lost their statuses, and then, they made tens of millions of dollars, but they just couldn't win the next tens of millions of dollars. It's hard to feel sorry for people like that because they've done very well. And the point of the system is not necessarily that people have small business contracts for life, but that they get enough small business revenue growth to propel them, right? And so the intent of the legislation around small business is not necessarily to support small businesses remaining federal contractors, but to give them an opportunity to participate as a springboard to other things. So hopefully that's what's happening with your firm.
No, I appreciate that. That gave me some good insight that I need to look further into, and I appreciate the conversation.
Well, absolutely. And stay with us, and you can go on mute, or you could just kind of hang out with us, pretending like we call it the B2G Roundtable. It's almost like you're at a conference and you're with 8 people and you're just sort of talking about different things. So feel free to stay with us, Don, and jump in as content seems relevant. So I'm just going to ask for a show of hands because I know there's a bunch of people that I said or that I know would like to participate today. So if I spoke to you before this event, could you just raise your hand if you're ready to contribute? Otherwise, I'm going to jump into something else, and that's fine. But does anyone have a question? Oh, we're going to bring Ike on first. And by the way, while we're waiting for Ike to join us, I do have some content, some developed content to share with you around numbers in government contracting from fiscal 20 or from fiscal 13 all the way up to fiscal 24. So I have some visuals to show you around the Trump 2.0 concept that we marketed this event with. And Ike, did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did. You got it correctly right. You're
All
like the
right,
top.
man. I know we spoke a couple of days ago. Thanks for joining. Before we talk about your business, where are you joining us from? And do you have any Thanksgiving anecdotes or fun plans?
Yeah, I'm actually joining from Culver City, Los Angeles, California. My company's merch.com. And we're actually going to Napa Valley wine country this year with the kids, doing the parade and the whole 9 yards. So excited
Well,
for that.
that's fantastic. And what pairs well with dark meat turkey?
Mashed potatoes?
I thought you were going to say a Cabernet.
Yeah, well, that too. But I don't have, it's not as altruistic as what Don said, which I tip his hat for what he does. That's really nice.
Well, that's great. And it's good to have time with your family. So what do you do? I mean, so you mentioned merch.com. I think I remember some of the things we were going to talk about, but let's just start wherever you'd like. So where would you like the conversation to go?
So we had a couple of these services, including MyGov. We're typically working with Fortune 1000 companies, making all their branded merchandise, promotional needs, anything from stationery to our big categories, reusable bags, tote bags, apparel, uniforms, really anything in the world of branding for other companies. We've done a couple of bids for, I think, more on the local level, nothing federal. We just got, I think I told you this over the phone. We worked on like under 20% margin, even less. And we still lost the bid. And it didn't even make sense how that person who won the bid, obviously everything needs to be transparent. They kind of show who won the bid, what they were charging. It was lower than the cost that we purchased it by maybe 15%. So I guess a couple of questions. One is, would love to see if you had any strategic strategies of how to maybe win, or potentially maybe where's a good place to start. That's A. And B, I guess, where do you see the differentiating factor of this new Trump administration compared to what we've had the last 4 years? Do you see the bidding process working differently? Do you see specific categories doing better than others? Would just love some recommendations there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take the first part of the question. The second part of the question is a whole other conversation, and I want you to be a part of it. I may not answer them sequentially right in order here, but as far as the bidding process, and you are dealing, is it fair to say that you were competing on price? Um,
They have a
maybe,
rubric,
maybe,
I
maybe
think.
not all the time, but maybe more so than many other businesses.
I think so. I think, the biggest thing was she said we were more experienced, our sample quality was better, but price was the main the major factor for them.
Okay. Is it true that in your business, and I don't know your business, but I understand the nature of it, is it true that the larger the order, the more they value the service and maybe things that go beyond the price per item?
I guess that's true with every type of project, I guess. I mean, they definitely want a white glove service, but at the same time, you know, if let's say it's a specific SKU that they're giving you, you know, it's kind of going to be the same across the board from all different types of vendors. The customer service, yes, I agree, but it's not like that's something that's included in the RFP where, you know, you're going to win it if your price is the same or
Sure. And do the folks purchasing your products, and specifically I'm asking this in government, do you believe that they are ordering things on a one-off basis, meaning somebody has an order, but it's not likely they're going to be calling you or having this need again? Or are they recurring contracts where they have the same needs over and over again?
They're definitely recurring. Let's say they're looking for pens or notebooks or mailers or apparel or uniforms. It's typically recurring, yes.
Okay, so as an overall strategy, I would recommend using the open records laws or FOIA. Are you familiar with FOIA?
I'm not.
Okay. So every state, including the federal government, has an Open Records or Freedom of Information Act law. They call it differently in different states. In my state, it's OPRA, the Open Public Records Act. And because you're talking about recurring contracts that come up over and over again, you have the ability, and people have the ability to use our website for this as well. When solicitations close, you can find out who won and the pricing by bidder, right? Now, how is that important? Well, if you develop this data over time, whether it's through our site or through your own research, because you can do open records requests as well, people like the anonymity of doing it through our site, but we're not the only ones that can do it. You can do it yourself. You will find that there is competitive data in the documents that you get through a FOIA request that lets you understand how price sensitive was the buyer, right? You may see a bid where it says price, you know, this is an invitation to bid where price is the only thing. If you have the lowest price, you're going to win. But I suspect that you're seeing a lot of opportunities where price is a driving factor, but it's not the only factor. Is that right?
I would say so. Yes.
Okay. So through the open records laws, you can ask for things like evaluation documents, and we do this all the time, where they will have in writing what they thought of each company, and then they'll have maybe a scoring matrix that says, okay, pricing was 50% of it, and these other areas were scored, 50% of the scoring as well, and you'll be able to identify over time which contracts is pricing the main driver versus a smaller factor on a relative basis. Now, is that a magic wand where you can just, snap your fingers and all the data is there? No, but we do have clients that are using the site and having us do these open records requests. So over a period of years, that data becomes more and more available over time. Now, you could hire somebody and just say, for a year, all I want you to do is FOIA requests, right? And you
FOIA,
could develop a lot of this data.
When you say FOIA, is it FOYA?
FOIA. So Freedom of Information Act is the federal term of art, but then each state has its own version. So it might be called the Open Records Law. It might be called the Sunshine Law in Florida. So there's different ways that it's called, but you would just, Google Open Records / FOIA state.
Got it. Cool.
Right? And so that's something that as a strategy, I think would really help you just based on the nature of the business and the availability of this information if you are willing to go get it. Oftentimes they don't like fulfilling them, right? So they might, one of the reasons people do it through us is that it's anonymous and we don't care if they don't like it.
Got it. And how does it work with typically, I mean, obviously I'm sure it varies from municipality to municipality, but how does it work with potentially someone wins the bid? Do they get higher chance of winning the bid in the future because if they deliver the products, correctly and on time, or I guess it depends?
Yes and no. And part of the value in doing the open records requests is you might see information that says company A has had this contract for 10 years. Or in another scenario, you might see a memo that says company A has it now, company B had it before, and company C had it 5 years ago. So that helps you understand, are they turning over their vendors? We did a study last year where we sent out emails to tens of thousands of government agency people, buyers. And we published a report, and if you just Google MyGovWatch press releases, you'll see a press release from early this year where people told us how often or how likely they were to hire incumbents. So the value of incumbency. And that's a free report. If you Google MyGovWatch press releases and go to that page, you'll see one about, called Buyer Report 2024. And I would recommend that you download it just to see the question around incumbency, how we asked it, and what came back. And I think it would be very telling because there is value in being the incumbent, but it's never automatic, right? Everything is at the contract level where there's certain contracts where the incumbent's going to win. But the real trick in government contracting is trying to figure out which things are a waste of time. Because there's a lot of dead ends in government contracting. And the only way you can really know where there's dead ends are is by researching at the contract level whether specific contracts are a dead end. And there's no easy way to know that other than investigation.
Is it safe to say that you would recommend someone like myself who's never won a government contract to maybe start at the local level before going to the national level?
Absolutely. And I would go further. I would say that there might even be people out there who might take 15% off or might be 15% below their own cost or above their own cost just to get a foot in the door. So we see all the time small local contracts where they have to rebid it because they received no bids. So if you're willing to do things that are not as relatively as profitable as other things you're doing, take a tiny contract, take a haircut on a tiny contract, because if you have a town in your state, right, and all of a sudden you have a contract with the state government because they have it, the reference at the local level has currency up the food chain.
Right. Interesting. And do most local governments kind of want to work with communities like local companies? Meaning, do local companies, like if I'm California and I want to work with a municipality in Minnesota, is it much harder for me than if someone in Minneapolis is, let's say, bidding on it?
I would say in your business, no. In some businesses, there's a lot more value in having someone who's in state or has an office nearby, but nothing about your business would lead me to believe that there's much of that.
Got
Other than the intrinsic, issue of shipping costs, right? Things like that. So things that you would have to build into your cost that might be different simply because of where, but I don't think they're scoring things based on where their vendor would be in your business.
Got it.
All
Awesome.
right.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Yeah. So stay with us. We have two other people who have raised their hands.
Sure.
So I'm gonna attend to Ethan Moses next, and Don, you can stay with us. And Don, if you have a follow-up question, just sort of come on and jump in. But let me promote Ethan to a panelist. And I promise I have a couple of really cool slides for you guys. You're really gonna love them. And I think we'll get to them after we talk with Ethan and then Michelle. Hi, Michelle. Michelle's been doing business with us, and Michelle will be coming to you very shortly. Ethan, welcome to MyGovWatch Live. Any plans for Thanksgiving?
Yeah. We're gonna be hosting a few family members and down at my parents' place. My very old grandmother is coming up from the Poconos, so that's gonna be fun. And we've got a couple folks from kind of recent imports from Ukraine who are gonna come by, and I got a great record of Ukrainian rock music from the 70s we're gonna play. So.
Well, that sounds fantastic. And I know who you are, Ethan, but for the
Yep.
purposes of everyone else, what do you do and where are you joining us from?
Sure. So I'm joining from Boston. My company is Spill Center. So we provide emergency response technology and emergency response management services to trucking companies, private fleets, big carriers, and we also work with the companies that insure them. We build a lot of systems to facilitate a better, more accurate environmental incident response.
Well, and thank you for your business and for using our platform. So what would you like to talk about today, Ethan?
So I've got one question, and actually my colleague Jenna Frizzell is here too, so she might pick up.
Hi, Jenna.
I'm gonna have to jump. But so we work in the environmental space, and obviously we're still waiting to see how everything plays out. But in election lead up, there was a lot of rhetoric that I would say signaled that something like an organization like the EPA and generally climate change as an issue in general might be deprioritized. Um, my Obviously that doesn't necessarily directly affect us, but obviously the changes in environmental regulation broadly would, the large deregulations would. Um, I guess my question is simple. How much change do you see administration to administration in the availability of federal funds for small businesses in niche sectors like niche and, I don't want to overstate it, but sectors that have a little tinge of politics to them, like the environmental sector?
Yeah, I mean, fantastic question. And I think your question is probably the opportune moment to go through some slides and then just sort of talk about them. So
Okay.
I wasn't sure when I would share my screen, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it because I think now is the time. So I have a share here, and I have exactly 5 line graphs to show everyone. And what I'm not going to do is sit here and present for 25 minutes. I'm just going to tell you what these graphics are, and then I'm going to leave them on the screen. And as people have questions, we'll just look at one or the other. So what we did was we developed line graphs that show spending over time by administration. So this is the first chart I wanted to show, and this is total spending, right? This is not just contracted spending. This is in-house spending and outsourced spending. Total spending starting in Obama 2, then Trump 1, then Joe Biden. So what we have is the total dollars in blue, and you can see the spike towards the end of the Trump administration and into the Biden administration. And then defense spending, I just arbitrarily added total defense spending here as sort of a bellwether for like one very large organization or department within federal government. And you can see that the defense spending was relatively flat in this 10-year period or 11-year period. So another thing I should point out, and this is some of you may know this, some may need to know it. The federal fiscal year begins October 1st and it ends September 30th. So you have to understand when the fiscal year starts. Obviously, it is promulgated by the executive and the congressional branches in coordination with one another. But the point is, when Donald Trump became president in January of 2017, they were operating in the fiscal year 17 budget. That budget started on October 1st of 2016. So for the first 9 or 10 months of the Trump presidency in 2017, he was a slave to that budget rather than someone who promulgated that budget. Okay, and so then the same thing happens in 2021. The 2021 budget took effect October 1st of 2020. Trump won, and it ended September 30th of 2021. Biden's already in office, almost 10 months at that point. So that's an important idea. So the first chart shows the total spending. Let's take a look at what we have down here. No, I want to do the one on the right first. Oh, by the way, all of these dollars are in billions. So now this chart here is total spending versus contracted spending. So it's the same numbers as the first chart in the blue line. The orange line will be contract dollars. So this is everything that you folks are after. And by the way, these contracted dollars are not just things that go to RFP. It's everything, any micro buys, simplified acquisition, whatever, you name it. A lot of the COVID spending that maybe didn't go to RFP is in there as well. So you can see that there's growth there, but there's not a significantly different story happening in the blue column than the light red column and then the light blue column with the Biden administration. So it's not a significantly different story in terms of federal contracted dollars. Now let's go over here to the third chart I have. These are all on one slide, but I'm zoomed in. So this would be total contracted spending versus contracted spending for the DoD, and I just arbitrarily picked Department of Defense and Homeland Security, because Homeland Security, obviously, that's a big part of the Trump theme in terms of policy and what they're doing or what they want to do at the border. So the blue line is total contracted dollars, and those are the same dollars that were in the chart we just looked at. And then we have defense contract spending, and you can see that that is roughly pacing in terms of how the line graph looks with contracted spending. And then Homeland Security contracted spending. Now, you can see a little bit of an anomaly in 2019 into 2020. And these anomalies could be tens of billions of dollars, right? So there is definitely some additional spending with Homeland Security in relation to what the overall curve looks like for contracted spending or DoD. The fourth one here we have is just a standalone for federal contracted dollars. So I thought I would show that so that it's a little bit, you can see the lines a little bit more pronounced, right? So we have a little bit over $500 billion in fiscal 2013, and then all the way out to fiscal 24, it looks like it's going to be over 800 or right around 800 billion. Then the last one has particular currency for everyone here. Let me just zoom out on this. So this is total contracted spending versus small business contracted spending as a percentage or as a part of total contracted spending. So this is the same blue graph that we saw earlier, but I thought this was really interesting because, different administrations, and trying not to be political, different folks say, we're more pro small business or the other guy's not small business, whatever the case may be. I mean, just look at how consistent that orange line is over the course of 11 or 12 years. And there's just really no changing the story in terms of the overall story. And I think the conclusion that I'm coming to, and this may start to answer what you're getting at, Ethan, and I would like others to chime in on this, is that the train has left the track, or the train has left the station, and there's no stopping it. And it's just going to continue to grow. And there's only anomalies, right? So you have the COVID anomaly. In an earlier chart, I left off the first year. Let me go back to it. Let's see if I can find which one it was. So you can see the green line in the bottom left here is missing data for 2013. We left that off intentionally because there was over $1 trillion in Hurricane Sandy spending in that 1 year, and it would have made the graph look totally different in a way that wasn't helpful for it was just like a one-time anomaly. So there are these one-time anomalies, whether it be, this hurricane or this pandemic, or, banks are too big to fail. What do we need to do? And all that sort of stuff. So let me just stop there, Ethan, and have you react to it. And we can go back to any of these charts and talk about it.
No, this is great. It's interesting to see that the biggest driver of within trend variance is just, the COVID effect in almost every, that's where the spike seems to come from. This is really helpful because it suggests that generally speaking, this is a machine that runs on its own. I guess that my follow-up question is, do we see distributional differences in spending across different branches of government? So for example, you may see more defense spending during periods of heightened security risk. You might see more budget dollars allocated to different divisions of the federal government based on, I guess we'd call just the political headwinds. Given the way that the funds that will eventually be made available through federal contracts are distributed, do we have any reason to believe that maybe the distribution of dollars from specific departments, so for example, we do a lot with DOT PHMSA, might change with the new administration, or would we expect the overall trend to sort of be the same? Like, the number pretty much stays the same across administrations, but we have variance across administrations between different divisions of the federal government, or do we just not see that at all?
Yeah, I think that's the million-dollar question. What I've concluded is that everything that happens next is at the micro, but not the macro level. And I really believe that. So, for example, obviously, and there may be folks who want to talk about this. I know there's at least a few people who mentioned it in their sign-up form for this session. We know the Department of Education is on the chopping block. Now, ultimately, is that political blather? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. But certainly, if a federal department were eliminated, then all of those dollars or some of those dollars would end up flowing to state contracts in that example. I think about some of the times of military tension over the last 10 to 12 years, and I don't feel that I'm even seeing that in the defense budgets. And that is the top left-hand corner. That's total spending. That's the orange line in the top left-hand corner. So, I know there was a presence in the Middle East and Syria over ISIS, and that was like, Obama into Trump. There certainly was, I think, the invasion of Crimea in there. I think by now, since we're 2 years into the Ukraine fiasco, if we were going to see a massive buildup, right, we might already see it in 23, I think. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, Ethan, but I think there are going to be some opportunities. I think they will be extremely micro in nature and not macro.
Great. Okay. And I guess the last question, because I'm gonna have to go after this last little minor question, is maybe a better way to get at what I'm looking for. How much do you think that federal appointments change the sort of the federal contracting behavior of the department where the appointee lives?
Are you referring to contracting officers and how that might be affected?
Yeah, so we're new to the government contracting space. I don't know a ton about sort of the finance behind the scenes. So if, for example, you have a great example might be an EPA director who's very skeptical of climate change changing the agenda of the organization overall. Can that affect federal contracted dollars distributed through RFPs by the EPA?
I think it can. I absolutely think it can. I think the degree to which it will is the question.
Yep.
So someone else who signed up, I'm not sure if this person is with us, and I don't want to put this person on the spot unless they want to participate, but someone mentioned Schedule F. And I had to look into that because I was aware of some of these things, but I didn't know the term of art for it. So Schedule F has to do with different classes of federal employees. And apparently at the end of the 2020 Trump administration, at the end of the 2020 year, there was an executive action that would have created a new class of federal employee, Schedule F. And Schedule F, according to a Trump person who was involved in it, would put about 50 or up to 50,000 federal employees in more of a discretionary role instead of like a career bureaucrat role. And then the Biden administration quickly reversed that. So now there's discussion about will Schedule F be coming back, and I think that could happen. Now the thing is, the contracting officers, I believe, are not what's called in a competitive service. So the competitive service, that's the class of employees. That's like the rank and file employees in the federal government whose jobs are generally safe and they're treated more as traditional employees rather than political appointees. And I think even if they put Schedule F back in place, which they probably will, that may have people like in your example, there might be lower levels of people in the EPA, using your example, who might be considered or treated more like a political appointee. But here's the thing. I think what the charts show us is if there's a business need for a contracting activity, that's really what's driving the buying, right? So is climate change a political football? Absolutely it is. But if there is a business need for a contracting activity, I don't see it going away. I think it's the discretionary needs, right? Needs where one party may think it's a need, the other party doesn't think it's a need. So that's probably the lens that I would look at it through is this a need that both parties agree is there, or is this a need that one party agrees is there, but maybe the other party doesn't agree is there? And I would very much look at things through the lens of that. And I think, for Spill Center and the business you're in, at least there's always going to be storms, right? Now, will there be contracts the way that we're in the last 4 years about like predicting what's going to happen next with climate change? Those might go down, but there will still certainly be massive dollars being paid out when there is an emergency or there is a disaster.
Great. That's really helpful. I'm going to leave it to Jenna to finish any other questions, but thank you so much, Nick. It's been really helpful as always.
Absolutely. Having a lot of fun. Jenna, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I would.
Wait, hold on, Jenna. Tell us what you're looking forward to this Thanksgiving.
I have recently moved, so I'm back closer to my family. So I'm excited to be able to walk to Thanksgiving this year instead of having to fly. So that's
Fantastic. That's great. That's great. So Jenna is also with Spill Center. So Jenna, what's on your mind?
Yeah, so I think Ethan had a lot of the questions that, just like as a company, we've all been talking about, looking at upcoming bids and everything. But I guess one question that I had that is a little bit related is what you're showing is government spending. But some of the partners that we work with, they're public companies or public businesses that are funded by the government. So I'm curious about your thoughts about some of like the downstream effects of a new administration, like how that's going to affect spending, not just from a government bids perspective, but just kind of down the line too.
Can you give like one example of that without naming names, a type of activity?
Yeah, so one example would be like a research center that we might be working like or collaborating with in a sense that is funded by a different department in the government.
Yeah, I think I would probably give the same answer for that, Jenna, quite honestly. And that is the nature of the research that the party is doing, is that research considered controversial? Or is it the kind of research that both parties agree should be happening? And if both parties agree it should be happening, then I suspect that they're going to keep doling out those dollars, whether they be grant dollars or contract dollars.
Okay.
But if it's controversial, I would think that there might be some changes there.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing that we haven't talked about yet, but I think that, if there is a new Department of Government Efficiency, boy, anyone who is in the artificial intelligence space that develops artificial intelligence that detects waste or that detects activities that could be automated, that's a contracting area that I think over the next 10 years is really where the most dollars will be made, is in automating tasks that can be automated and finding ways to spend money where people either do not have the time to find those dollars or the incentive to find those dollars. So
Yeah.
artificial intelligence, folks, it's coming. It's here and it's coming. We're still in the infancy. Follow-up questions.
I don't think so. I think your point makes sense I like how you phrased it of like whether both parties would consider it a need or whether it's more of an optional or a nice to have, and how that's going to influence just what's available and what spending is happening. So I think that really wraps it up. That is very interesting, gives us a lot to think about. So thank you.
Well, there certainly is a lot to think about. And with that, Jenna, please stay with us. You can just jump in and chime in as you see fit. We're going to bring Michelle on. Michelle, welcome to MyGovWatch Live. We just need your audio.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, Michelle, welcome, welcome. Before we go any further, what are you looking forward to with Thanksgiving?
Well, I'm a little different than everyone else. I actually live in Canada, so we did it in October.
Oh, that's right.
I do send a wish out to all my American friends. It's been a ride the last few months. For Thanksgiving, I just want to send thoughts of healing, inclusivity, and just a settlement of what we all went through the last few months.
Well, I'm upbeat about it. There are definitely, I think, more people are willing to talk to one another. Hopefully that continues. I'm just reminded of an anecdote, and I'll probably bring this up to my nephew, who is now 22 years old, and I have this distinct memory. I'm glad I'm not a turkey on Thanksgiving. I remember him standing up on the table about 10, 12 years ago and singing that song. And whether it's in October or November or when it is, I'm glad I'm not a turkey on Thanksgiving Day. So, for the benefit of those who don't know, Michelle, what do you do and where are you joining us from?
Our company is actually in Austin, Texas. I'm joining you from just north of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. I'm the CEO of a company called Rover Pass. We're very, very niche. We work both federal and SLED on reservation software for parks and campgrounds. So it's a PMS system, but it's so niche. And what I wanted to jump on for is actually to address Ike's question on the FOIA side. So because we are so niche, we were able to do the research, and FOIAs gave us absolute transparency. I know when contracts are opening. I know what the reasons for the win and the loss were. And an example for Ike, we bid on an MWR, a federal bid under SBA. We lost the bid, although our price was the lowest. And we also lost to a company outside our niche, which is very, very weird. So just going back to what you said, Nick, when we looked at the FOIA afterwards, the award documents, they won on disadvantage. They were an LGBTQ women-owned company. So MWR wasn't exactly looking for the lowest price. And that kind of thing, to your point, Nick, Ike, if you can take the time to do that FOIA research, it's going to add transparency to your bids.
Okay, I love that. Thank you so much.
And I don't know if this is allowed or not, but by all means, if you have questions about how to get FOIAs, how to organize your FOIAs, I'd be happy to chat with you.
Oh, thank you. That would be awesome.
No worries. And then Nick, a question for you. One of the things, given what I said about we know the landscape of our bids, mostly at the state and the federal level. At the municipalities, it's a little tougher because there's 4,000 counties. I'm not doing that work. But what I did notice is we went a little off rails during the election period. So award dates were pushed forward, expected bids did not open. And I'm wondering if there's a correlation there or just a coincidence.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would read too much into that.
Okay.
Are you saying that there were things that didn't happen that you were expecting to happen?
Yeah, so there's one bid. It was supposed to be awarded at the end of September. And they just kept pushing it forward without telling us. And it's still not finished yet. And I was assuming maybe it's wrapped in some of the election stuff I just didn't understand. And then we had another hit by a hurricane. That one's understandable.
Yeah, I think anything that affects large numbers of people, I think that's always going to be a factor. But you sort of get back to what we were talking about earlier, and that is if the contracting activity is fundamentally necessary, and if both parties agree it's necessary, I would think that that is a tell that the procurement people are safe in a new administration because they can't let new contracts out unless there's enough procurement people. And at a
Gotcha.
certain point, a contracting officer can't be a contracting officer for twice as many contracts at the same time without degrading the procurements of all of those opportunities. The other thing, of course, being that, the contracting officer is not the only person involved in making a decision in a procurement. They're certainly involved in it, but there's other business users who are certainly always involved in the federal procurement. So that sort of goes back to the idea or the conclusion I'm coming to, and that is, and this is not meant to be a political statement, truly, is that the train has left the station and the numbers just keep going up. And there's no reason to suspect, based on the charts that I've shown, that things will be significantly different. They will only be significantly different at the micro level. So
Right.
if there are new technologies in artificial intelligence that help monitor the border, I think that spending's going up. Um, are there new technologies that they're going to be using to detect inefficiencies? I think that's going up. But I'm not sure if the story will be significantly different 4 years out.
Okay. That's fair. I was just curious because it was going so well and then we hit a brick wall.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think better days are ahead, Michelle.
Thank goodness.
Well,
Thank
and stay with us because at this point, I'm just going to mention, and we're just about an hour in, folks. Now would be the time to raise your hand if you have a question, because we've covered a lot of areas so far. We're only an hour in. We let these sessions go on. In some cases, it's been an hour and 45 minutes. We've also had sessions that have ended at an hour and 5 or an hour and 10 minutes. So what I don't like to do is try to keep us, captive for a specific amount of time. 90 minutes is ideal. But if you have a question, now would be a great time to, we're going to bring Ike back in.
Yeah, I just, again, same, if we have any other questions, is there someone to reach out to on your team just to kind of ask it, so I'm not taking up anyone's time? Seems like they're a lot educated in this world of RFPs than I am.
I will say this. We take lots of very, what I would call softball questions in this session or in these sessions, Ike. So if you're referring to using our platform, let me contact you offline, because I think you are using our platform at some level. So if the questions are about the platform, we should do that offline, and we can do that. But if you have other general questions about government contracting, don't be shy, because there are certainly people in the audience who have the same questions.
I'm just going off what Michelle said. Again, the FOIA question, I just quickly Googled FOIA California, and there's just so many different links, and not sure what's the best way to find, that previous information.
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more. And Michelle, please chime in. But what you're going to find is that every state has very similar laws, like at the statute level. What you're going to find is at the bureaucrat level, everybody thinks they're interpreting the law the same way, but they're all interpreting it a little bit differently. And Michelle's smiling as I say that. I'll just give you a few anecdotes while we're talking, and Michelle can jump in. But in doing thousands of FOIA requests over the last 15 years, including suing the federal government twice over FOIA, we've had crazy things happen. We had somebody quote us $7,000 for documents once. We're talking like, maybe documents this thick, where 98% of the cost was legal prep fees or legal time in reviewing documents for what can be released. So we've had them try to do that. That didn't work. During COVID, there were folks in Texas who were saying, well, we're not going to send you any documents, but you're welcome to come here and look at them. And so that's something that they throw up from time to time.
A couple other things, Nick, is if you're not in state, they won't give it to you. So we'll do that for you as an anonymous. And then others, they've sent us the wrong contracts and we have to resubmit for new FOIAs.
Yeah, we have tricks that I will not disclose. Legal tricks, legal tricks, meaning
I know.
things that are above board that I will not disclose here, where we are able to get around in-state resident requirements or in-state office requirements. So we have that down, and we can do FOIAs in all 50 states. We even have one coming up next month in Utah where they're sending us to mediation. So they're forcing us to get on a Zoom with a third party, a commercial business, where our FOIA request will include their proposal. And we're not even doing this research. We're not targeting them in any way. It's just in an industry where we're aggregating everything in that industry. We have certain premium markets where we do that. And we're basically going to get on a Zoom. And I don't know what this mediator is going to say, because what they're doing is they're making it seem like we're on one side of the table and a commercial party is on the other side of the table. That's not really the nature of FOIA. It's, look, we're party A, the government is party B, and you're either going to follow the law or you're going to make us sue you, and that's what it comes down to.
Is there like a standard of net payment terms that the government typically does? Is it net 30, net 90, some pay up front? Is there, or that kind of varies from RFP to RFP?
Michelle, would you like to speak to that as somebody who's actually a contractor?
Sorry, I missed your question, Ike. My Slack is going crazy.
Let me just turn on my camera. Sorry. I asked, is there like a standard net payment terms for governments? Or depending on the.
Sometimes I'll see that they'll ask what our net term is, but mostly I see 30 or 45 days. It depends on the contract. I don't think it's standard across.
Cool.
And whatever
Vicky,
schedule they're using as well.
Okay, I'd just like to add something there, only because you're in a price-sensitive business. If you ever suspect you're bidding on a contract where it's highly possible that you could come in at the same number as someone else, here's a little trick for you. If you write in the payment terms area of your bid, 1% net 10, let's say you submit the same bid as another party and you're both the low bidder at the exact same number, and your bid says 1% net 10, what that means is you're going to give the government 1% off their invoice if they pay you within 10 days. You just gave yourself a tiebreaker in the bid process.
Got it. Okay, smart. Like it. I'll
You
take
can
all
also
the.
protest bids as well if you believe you should have won it, if the incumbent stayed in place.
Oh, you could oh, cool.
At the federal level, I just saw a graphic this morning from a law firm we work with that there is a very large percentage of federal opportunities that are protested, and something like 60 or 65% of federal bids that are protested result in some relief to the protester. So people are often wondering, like, how likely is it that we could be successful in a protest? You may not get the contract, but something's going to happen that may change the procurement.
How
We
do you
see a lot of protests in our space, a lot.
How do you just send an email, or is there like
No, there's a whole process for protesting. And you have to make sure you're not ticking off the party that's purchasing your services while clearly explaining why you're the better fit.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's typically timelines, and the federal government has an extremely rigorous and specific set of guidelines for how that works. But even at the state and local level, there's typically like a 10-day window. Might be 10 days, might be 2 weeks, where if you know something that's not fair that's happening, you have a limited window of time to put that in writing. And if you think there's no chance you're going to win the contract, at that point, it may not matter who doesn't like it.
Cool. Also a little more, I used to have MyGovWatch. We just been paying month and we didn't really use it for a while. So I would like to do the sign up that you mentioned and try this for the 30 days.
Get it back.
Yeah, get it back. Try this.
Well, yeah, I'll contact you when we're done the session, but certainly we'd love to have you back. Yeah, I mean, we try to offer a tool that is jump in, jump out, right? So a lot of the companies that we compete with are going to say we want $7,000 and we want it today. And then if you decide not to use it for the last 6 months, that's on you. Our model is that you pay as you go, it's inexpensive, and if you need to leave, you can always come back, and we're happy to have you back.
Yep, that's why I'm here.
So we have another question here. Let's bring this individual on. And I am not going to try to pronounce this name. I am going to ask politely if you can tell me your name. Only because my eyes, some of the characters are running together. I turned 50 this year and it's affecting what I can see on screen. Okay, and is it Fifi?
It's Fifi, you got it right. Let me get
All
on
right, I
video.
got it right. I couldn't tell and it was a smaller version. I couldn't tell if it was multiple L's or what it was, but welcome to MyGovWatch Live. Are you looking
Thank you.
forward to Thanksgiving, or where will you be celebrating?
So I'm currently in Oakland, California. I'll be driving down all the way down towards Southern California to a small little area called Rialto. And Rialto is right next to San Bernardino to spend time with my in-laws.
Well, that's fantastic. And what do you do and where are you joining us from?
So I'm joining from Oakland, California. I am part of a software development company. We build websites and mobile apps and do SEO. I happen to be on the call today with another friend of mine. His name is Chike, and we are looking into doing a joint capability statement as part of our initial entry into the space. So just to kind of give a little overview, we've been in the private space for a while, and this is really our first time sort of jumping into government contracting. So, I'm learning a lot from all the questions that I'm hearing. So one of the questions that I have, and Chike couldn't speak, he had an audio issue, so I'm going to read his question. He said, can you please share with us how to be involved with the process of creating an RFP with a government agency so we can have a preferable option when bidding on the contract?
Okay, I'm going to ask you to rephrase that question. Are you asking how to write an RFP response?
How to write the RFP response, especially in that case where we are doing a joint. So it's two companies coming together,
okay,
presenting for an RFP, and how to present successfully.
Absolutely. And is this question
clarify.
related to federal contracting?
That's correct.
Clarify.
Okay. So there are multiple ways to team with one another on federal contracts.
No.
One thing that you can do is create a joint venture, right? And now I'll say this because occasionally I have to say this. I am not an attorney, but I just know a lot about the regulations. So there is what's called a populated joint venture. That's a joint venture that has employees. And then you have an unpopulated joint venture. That's a joint venture on paper. And then the two companies are working independently of one another. Are you both sole proprietors, or do you have resources that work for you?
We are both sole proprietors.
Okay.
Can I speak? I can't. You guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you now, Chike.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm happy to kind of get into what we were about to get into, but actually that wasn't necessarily the original intention of my question. My question was actually more around, I've heard that, by the time the RFP comes out, that a lot of times the agency has already been working with with a potential vendor to kind of like even understand what they want. And by that time, they probably have some vendors in mind who are working with them to put together the RFP, who will be top of mind for them when they are selecting the vendor to work with. And I was wondering, A, if that's true, and B, how to get involved with an agency as they're crafting the RFP so you can get that preferential kind of, option.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to make sure I answer this in a way that's tailored to the situation at hand.
Yeah.
Are you both sole proprietors? And I think the answer was yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So, and we're talking about federal contracts, and that matters. The larger the contract federally, the more likely that is the case. So when you even get into the millions of dollars, right? They already have contractors and your software developers, right?
That's right.
Okay. So even when you get into the low seven-figure contracts, let's say $1 to $10 million, there will certainly be vendors that have already done business with the agency that you'd like to do business with. It is not true. Here's what's not true. It's not true that every federal contract is pre-written, every RFP is pre-written for one vendor. It's just not true.
Okay.
It's more likely, because there's so many software development companies that do business with the federal government, that the larger the contract, over 1 million, over 5 million, over $10 million, the more likely it is there's a lot of federal vendors who have already done business with that agency. So while it's not written for one company, it's probably written for 5. And here's what I mean by that. And Michelle, being in the software business, will understand this. So if you made a requirement of the RFP that the company must have software experience, well, now you have to read 1,000 responses because the requirement is, well, you have to have software development experience. But when they're smart, here's what they do. They make the requirement specific, but not specific that they only get one bid. So they'll say, well, it's better if you have 3 years of experience with our federal agency, and you need to have 3 other commercial references where you've done the same thing for at least 5 years. But they already know that 10 companies can meet that. So they're limiting the competition but they still have enough bids to where they can fulfill the regulation that it's competitively bid, right? So here's what I would encourage you guys to do. I would consider, I would look for opportunities to offer either unsolicited proposals to federal agencies, because there are regulations you could look up. What is an unsolicited proposal? Look that up. It's a federal term of art. Look for very small things that you can do in development for federal agencies and do it through either an unsolicited proposal, or look for opportunities where they're below the micro purchase threshold for small development projects. Because as two individuals, the less important part is that you're teaming. You could form a company and just work together. The more important thing is the smaller the opportunity, the more likely it is that you're going to be competing with much smaller companies. Does that help, Chike?
Yeah, for sure. And where would we find stuff like that? Because I mean, if it's unsolicited, it wouldn't be on like a SAM.gov or like
so there's nothing stopping anyone from making contacts at different agencies. Here's what you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to directly contact people in the federal government in procurement. And what that means is that there's a cone of silence where they cannot talk to you. They can only talk to you through email in a formal process back and forth via email. But if you have contacts in the federal government and you want to talk to them about a development project and they're willing to listen, it all starts there. And they will, if they're interested in your idea, they will tell you what to do next, right? But the smaller the project, if you propose something that's unsolicited, or if you bid on something that is below the micro purchase threshold, or below the simplified acquisition threshold, the more likely you can be successful. And it's just a traditional networking process at that point of getting to know people at the federal agency you'd like to work with. A second thing I'll mention, every federal agency has a contracting forecast. So you can look up on the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, Department of Education. They'll have a forecast that says what's coming up in the future. And here's why that's important for you, gentlemen. It's just as valid to be a subcontractor on a federal contract. Okay? And all of the prime contractors, let's say you're a prime software contractor and you have a $100 million contract with the Department of Commerce, whoever, Defense, you name it. They will have a requirement to spend 5% of that contract with disadvantaged businesses. And you could look up the definition of that. You may qualify individually, or if you form an LLC, that LLC may qualify. So I would strongly advise you to look into subcontracting as well if you're interested in federal contracts. I'll take it one step further. Look into the OSTABU program within the federal agencies that you'd like to work with. That's the Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Development Unit. I think that's what it's called, or something. So I probably butchered it, but the OSTABU. So it's an office within each federal agency where someone's job is to make you aware of contracting opportunities for small and disadvantaged businesses. So I would look that up as well.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow-up questions.
I think
I'd like to
just to
add
follow up
to
to
what,
that. Sorry about that. Follow up to that was something that Ike mentioned earlier, and I think you've kind of alluded to the same thing. Is it then more productive, besides the examples that you shared with us, to focus on local, contract opportunities before we ride up to the federal level, or it's all open, all available?
If you have contacts in the federal government, there's no reason not to go there.
Okay.
If you do not have contacts, then absolutely I would recommend state and local, particularly local first. Here's why. It is very much like a food chain, right?
Okay.
And the federal government is at the top of the food chain, and Rialto, California is at the bottom of that food chain. It's far more likely that you can sell a development project to a local government and do it inexpensively. Don't make it very expensive for them. Just get the reference. That's the most important thing. And then it's a stepping stone. Sell a small development project to the city of Rialto. Then the county will see that as a reference. Then the state will see the county as a reference. Then the federal government will see, oh, look, this company, they're a small development company in California. They have local, county, and state experience. There's no reason they won't hire you for a large federal contract at that point.
Got it.
Now,
Thank
I'll
you
say
very
this again. This came up earlier. Google MyGovWatch press releases. We did a press release early this year. It was a buyer survey report. It's free. If you find the press release, you put in your name, you can download the report. And it talks about how often government agencies will hire companies that they had never heard of, and they do it more than you think. So at the smaller levels of government, I would absolutely encourage you to be bidding on software projects for state and local government, because one of the things they also mention in that report is that government agencies feel like they can't find the technology resources they need to do the things that they need to do. So you guys are in the right business at the right time. Anything around artificial intelligence and software, if you can just do anything for any small government agency, the future is unlimited.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of fun, folks. Again, we take this generally to 90 minutes. That's about 10 minutes from now. Don, I think you might have had a follow-up question.
No, I was just going to add that that's what you said was very true. And quite often, the people in those departments will help guide you. So if there's certain challenges, like, for example, there's a federal contract in the state of Utah, but you're headquartered and you're a general contractor in Kansas City, and you have contracting licenses in other places. A lot of times they'll let you bypass the contracting license that they might need at that state or county level, and you'll get people who will take what you already have in possession because of the quality of your work and what you're doing. So you'll get those references and you'll be able to bypass certain things that not every other vendor is required to do specifically.
I truly appreciate that, Don, and it never ceases to amaze me. When we started this series, folks, it was me and maybe a co-host, and it felt very much like, we were on a stage and talking to people. But I really enjoy how this series has evolved into a conversation among people who are just have different related needs in government contracting. So I appreciate that input, Don, and I think the guys will as well. So I'm just going to ask. I'm going to check and see if there are any more Q&As here.
Can I ask a question? It's kind of off topic.
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
But maybe one of the other panelists has faced it. What do you do when you come across a bid that says it has to be located in the continental US? We do have nearshore staff. Is there a way around that, or is that just a walk away from the bid?
I wonder, and I know why you're asking that. You're in the software business too.
It's a
I
cost
think,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, I think there's a fair chance that people asking for that may not always be targeting domestic or software companies that have resources in other countries. I think there's still a fair amount of ignorance about where people are in the procurement community. But that is also an area where I would selectively consider protesting, to be quite honest. Because if you haven't, go ahead.
We were gonna bid on one in South Carolina, and we asked about the offshore, can we do nearshore? They said absolutely no. I didn't realize that we could protest that. That's good to know.
Yeah, and when we say protests, there will typically be a procedure that can be followed. But a lawyer told me once, anyone can sue anyone else at any time for any reason. And I think that's true here. And I'm not suggesting that you would just go do that. But if it's
no, not looking to spend lawyer dollars.
yeah. But if and people use lawyers in federal contracts suing against protests all the time. It's a massive niche industry within the legal field. So
Wow.
I would say, you can get ahead of some procurements by letting them know, and maybe they don't make that a requirement. And I'm sure you're already doing that. But if you haven't been able to get ahead of a procurement and they do put it that way, there's nothing stopping you from writing a letter saying, hey, we don't want to protest this, but right? And you can make it a really nice email that says, we don't want to protest this, but, and then just see what they say. And they might
Okay.
change it. And if you don't feel like you have a frontline chance to win it anyway, I don't think you're ruffling feathers by phrasing it that way.
Perfect. Yeah, because there's only like what, 50 states that we can even work with. So I don't want to eliminate them by ticking them off.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a fine line. It's a fine line, but generally speaking, and I've been involved in protests before, as an interested party, as a consultant. If you are aggrieved, you're not going to win anyway if it's not fair.
That's true. So, no, I
Yeah.
appreciate it. I know it's off topic, but it was one where I was like, does this take us out of government? I don't think so. I've been doing this a long time. There's always another door you can go through.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It looks like we have someone else, Joseph, who can join us here.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Hey, Joseph, welcome to MyGovWatch Live. Are you looking forward to Thanksgiving? And if so, where are you going to spend it?
Yeah, definitely. We are hosting at my house. So we're gonna play host. I'm based here out of Los Angeles, California.
Well, welcome to MyGovWatch Live. You're in Los Angeles. What do you do and who do you do it for?
Yeah, so my name is Joseph. I raise money at an organization called the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation. So we're a nonprofit that does a lot of pro bono assistance to the business community in Los Angeles. We did apply for a major EPA grant, so it's really interesting because we haven't heard back yet. So it's really interesting to hear as I look at as I think about our application, what is the business use case as it goes into this next administration, and whether we're in jeopardy or whether, yeah. So just I love the conversation. I've learned so much. Thank you for hosting it.
Well, it's my pleasure, and it's my understanding that grant making processes are just as subject to FOIA as contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in mind.
Yeah, for sure. But I wanted to ask you a question to your earlier point, and we could talk about it offline. But I've actually been spinning up like custom AI solutions for local government here in Los Angeles, because I come from the government world, and once I saw the power of AI and its ability to get information in the hands of users pretty efficiently, I thought to myself, wow, government really needs this, because even asking for a basic request like graffiti removal or asking for clarification on code, building codes, those things can take weeks, right? And so with the power of AI, what we figured out is, well, why don't we just create mini models of these local governments and put it in the hands of people so they can get, solutions and answers like a lot faster. So that's actually been going pretty well. But I actually really enjoyed what you said, and I would love to follow up with you directly, because if we could spin up, solutions for government agencies at the federal level, I think that would be extremely powerful. And with the technology where it's at now, you can spin up an MVP, pretty rapidly, that can solve a pain point in just a couple of days for a government agency. So I just wanted to kind of come on here and request that we kind of talk a little bit more about that, directly, because I got a few ideas. I'd love to work
Yeah,
with you.
absolutely. I'm big into networking, Joseph, and I would love to talk. My email address is nick.bernardo@mygovwatch.com. And let me
Perfect.
just put it into the chat for anyone
Okay.
else who might want it. By the way, we've had people end up doing business with one another as a result of participating here. So we always encourage people, if there's a way you can do business with one another as a result of attending one of our sessions, we encourage that. So that's my email address, folks. And Joseph would love to speak to you whenever we're
Yeah.
on.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
But yeah, thanks for joining. And I just wanted to sort of one last call if anyone has a question before we wrap things up. So we'll just sort of give that a minute.
I don't, but I'm a talker. I just want to say one thing. Anybody that's not using this software, I don't work for Nick. But it has made my life infinitely easier with RFPs. So if you're sitting on the edge of your table, not sure if you're doing it, it's not overly expensive and it will make your life better.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words, Michelle. We can always use a pat on the back. So thank you for that. And let me just check one more time. I don't think there is anything else. Is there a question? Yes, anyone can feel free to share an email in the chat. Fifi, if you'd like to put an email in there, go ahead and do that, or a link to your business. So, folks, I'm going to wrap it at that. We're looking at the home screen for MyGovWatch.com. And so, but I'll just say it's a promo. Anyone have a question on MyGovWatch Live? It's advertised 13-day free trial, but we make that a 30-day free trial. If you're not already using the software, we'll bump it out to 30 days. So please keep that in mind. So with that, folks, that'll do it for today's edition of MyGovWatch Live. Remember, if you're not already a subscriber, start your free at MyGovWatch.com today. If you want to win more government contracts for less, you'll be glad you did. And thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day, and happy Thanksgiving to all.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks, Nick.
Bye-bye.